So good evening and welcome to our live event, POISE and the Roots of Pittsburgh's Black Community Foundation. I'm Mark Lewis, President and CEO of POISE Foundation. For 40 years, POISE Foundation has given back to Black communities, helping to achieve self-sustaining practices through strategic leadership, collective giving, grant making, and advocacy. This year, as we marked 40 years of philanthropy, we hosted a series of online events to celebrate Black excellence and Black philanthropy. We featured the foundation's accomplishments, grantees, supporters, such as those tuning in this evening. Tonight, we want to take a moment to look back and look ahead at the future of POISE. Founder Bernie Jones was a true visionary and often created entities and programs before they had common names like social investing and giving circles. But in his wisdom, the work he did and organizations he created were not done on an island. He surrounded himself with people he could trust, who had real concern about families in our community, and were willing to go on a journey with him. And we are blessed tonight to have three of Bernie's closest allies with us. You may recognize some of our guests this evening. They've all played an essential role in the creation of POISE Foundation, as well as having past leadership roles in Pittsburgh's community. They are all original incorporators and the perfect individuals to close out our year-long anniversary celebration. Our first guest is Lenny Henry. She has served POISE not only as an incorporator, but also as a board member, vice president, and donor. She's also ruling elder and member of Bidwell Presbyterian Church, president and founding member of the Financial and Moral Supporters of the Youth of Allegheny County, which also has an endowment in POISE Foundation. Our next guest, Robert Pipkin. He is a certified school superintendent. His education career spans more than 40 years with Pittsburgh Public Schools, Duquesne University, and the charter school education system in Phoenix, Arizona. Bob is a motivational speaker whose personal message on the power of you has been featured in national publications such as USA Today and the New York Times. And last but not least, C. Richard Gilcrease. Richard is the current owner of Nation Time Video and a former executive director and board member of Urban Youth Action Incorporated. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join this conversation and to celebrate the history and the future of our organization. I wanted to start the conversation asking each of you how you met Bernie Jones. Really, what was your first encounter with him? And if you can share what impact he may have had on your life and maybe your career. So Lenny, if we can start with you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I met Mr. Jones in the late 50s when I was a student at Miller Elementary School. And the principal, Mr. Brewer, would always bring speakers and all sorts of community people to our school. Well, Mr. Jones was one that came to Fifth Avenue as a to Miller Elementary School as a social worker. And he began to have all types of programs, and they would pull groups together, and he would present these community people to us. And that was my first meeting him. And from that point, I was promoted to Fifth Avenue High School. And there, I was still involved with Mr. Jones. He would come to Fifth Avenue and do all kind of seminars and different things. And so in 1966, he approached me about Urban Youth Action Program and if I would be interested in being a part of it. And I said, of course, yes. And so I was the first student that was enrolled into the program. But mostly, I want to say is that Mr. Jones had that kind of spirit that he could encourage us to do things that, was a little like, well, I'm not sure about that. But when he got through speaking with you about what he wanted to do as far as the different seminars and all, he, encouraged us. So we, the students, we decided to be a part of what he was doing there at Miller Elementary School and then at Fifth Avenue.
Great. Yeah, and the fact that Mr. Jones was 6'5" and about 250 pounds, that added to his ability to be persuasive.
Yeah, yes, very.
Bob, you want to talk about your first encounter?
Well, Mark, first of all, I'm very honored that I was asked to participate. I met Mr. Jones. Our kids were going to Carlow College. They have an elementary school there. So, we drove the same cars, and each day we would have a conversation. And I'll tell you what, I was so impressed by this man, and he was I was looking for. He got me involved in community activities. And I'm telling you something, what he did in my life, I can think about it. I've embraced it, who I am today. I've done a lot of community work, NAACP president, not to impress you, LaRoche College, and chaired a hospital board. It was all because of Bernie Jones. He always believed in giving back to the community. And, I'm hoping one day that somebody would name a street after Bernie Jones, name a school, because I want you to think about this. From UIA, Mister's Investment, the POISE Foundation, what other Black man or woman has done what Bernie Jones has done? And so I tell you what, my hat is off to this trailblazer. He was before his time. He taught me about money, and what my wife and I do. We do financial literacy for the African American community and I'll talk about that later. It's a serious problem with the African American community. And, we need somebody like a Brother Jones to get out there and help us, because we perpetuate problems economically. Poverty is 21% in our community. And Bernie always taught me about saving, helping other people. And so I tell you what, this man will always remain in my heart, in my mind, what he's done for me. And plus, he was a great family man. Our families were we embraced each other. I talked to his wife maybe once or twice a month. So, I don't want to be labored, but sometimes I have tears in my eyes when I think about Brother Jones. So I'm just saying he just changed my whole life.
Yeah, that reminds me of in the office, we used to have this portrait, and I think we still have it. Someone did, I guess it was either a cartoon or caricature of Bernie Jones, and it was him, kind of standing in the middle, and there were about 8 or 9 different hats all around him. It just kind of represented the fact that he was involved in so much and had so many thoughts going through his mind, created so many entities, and it was just very representative of who he was back then. And Richard, I'll toss it over to you. I know you've got several stories, but yeah, how did you guys meet? And
no question. I met Bernie Jones at a different time in my life, which was after having been ill. In the beginning of my life, I had this history book of eczema, asthma, all kinds of medical problems. And I met Bernie Jones right at the time when I was trying to shake all that medical stuff and just be a kid. So my mom sent me to JWJ. And if anybody knows what that means, especially this listening audience, JWJ was James Weldon Johnson. It was a camp outside of Pittsburgh in which Bud and Libby Hope, who were school teachers in Maryland, who would come up here and actually start this camp. In the camp, everything in the camp was named after somebody Black. The Toussaint L'Ouverture Trail, the Ralph Bunch Cabin, the Marion Anderson Troop House, you name it, there was something in that camp named after some famous Black person. Well, Bernie Jones was the next famous Black person, because here's a man that just came out of the Marine Corps boot camp. He got a medical discharge and had all of us little kids up there in his unit, because that's what they called it. You had the little kids unit, they had the big kids unit. I was in the big kids unit. And man, this guy was so big compared to us little kids. He was huge, and he would do stuff. He would have you out there looking for a female ant, or he would have you doing crazy stuff. Well, Bernie Jones lasted in that camp. Every 2 weeks, we would be out there. So instead of me, one of the little poor kids, going for 2 weeks, I wind up being out there for 2 months. Every 2 weeks, I came home, dried the clothes, washed the clothes, and went back out to the camp. Well, Bernie Jones made such an impression on my life that when he left that camp and came back to the Hill District where I happened to live at, he was assigned, first of all, Addison Hall up there on Grove Place. And then he got moved over to Hill City Municipality. Well, he encouraged all of us, from Paul Patton to you name him, McKinley Wade, all of us little kids. And I say little kids because all of us like 13, 14 years old, we all came over to Hill City, and he started something called the Explorers. Now, you can imagine some ghetto Black kids not wanting to be in no Cub Scout group. Trust me, we're not trying to be no scouts. But Bernie Jones talked us into going to something called the Explorers. And the Explorers were different. We had blazers. We went out and did community activities. We sponsored eye clinics where people would come and get their eyes checked, because he would talk to the local optometrist and have him come up there, and the Explorers would work with that. Then one day he got talked into meeting this lady in Maryland, and her name was Mrs. Duckett, Martha Duckett. Miss Pauline, I can't think of Pauline's last name, but she set it up so that he would take us kids out of the Hill District now and go to Washington, D.C. Now, some of us ain't been around the corner, much less going to Washington, D.C. In fact, when he started questioning all of us about, where you been? Oh man, I've been to East Liberty. I've been to, in fact, we even said, one of them said, well, I've been to Aliquippa before. and that was the real thing about, that's how far most of us Black ghetto kids had gone to. Well, we went to Washington, D.C. as a part of the Explorers of Post 48. The impact that he had on my life, I was one of those kids that was so quiet and reserved because I couldn't talk. And now you can't shut me up. But the point is, I used to sweat my entire clothes out if he made me get up and talk in front of a group. I mean, I get finished with the group and I'd be soaking wet because he would make us get up. Lenny would testify to this one. We would make us get up and go and talk to whomever. We talked about how we met people over at Bidwell Church. I met people over at Bidwell Church when I was 13 and 14 years old because Bernie Jones took us over to Bidwell, had us doing programs with the kids over there, and we had to get up and speak. Well, in fact, that's where that whole thing came from for Urban Youth Action. He would always have surprise closing remarks. Well, he didn't start that in Urban Youth Action. He started that up with the Explorers of Post 48. So all of us did that kind of stuff. But the impact has been so tremendous that today I talk to Bernie Jones every day. His words, his wisdom, all of those things have been passed on to me because that's what was important. And Urban Youth Action getting started was after the Explorers of Post 48 and after he started the Misters. Well, they might have come, the Misters and Urban Youth Action might have come simultaneously because he was actually setting up these things. And Urban Youth Action was just tremendous because during the time the Explorers was operation, you got to remember this one. White kids used to come into the Hill District and clean up vacant lots. And Bernie Jones would sit outside of Hill City and look at those kids coming down the street with brooms and rakes and all that stuff, cleaning up lots. And the kids from the Hill District were sitting on the corner somewhere not doing anything because they didn't have nothing else to do. And he told me then, I'm going to start something that will help us have our kids learn how to do this stuff. And that was the genesis of what we now call Urban Youth Action, because we were cleaning up vacant lots when the Hill District. And so when you start talking about the original incorporators, I signed my name in 1979 along with Lenny McCroman. And we signed our names to the original incorporation of Urban Youth Action in 1969. And that was after 1966 to 69, we went through a tremendous problem with Urban Youth Action and the Redevelopment Authority because of the fact that they did not want us to become independent. And Bernie Jones's whole point of view was about us becoming independent. So we're going to answer the second question at another time, but that's how I met Bernie Jones, and that's how he started grooming me at 13 years old.
Yeah, I appreciate that because when you think about the history of POISE, it goes back in steps. It wasn't just a thought. There was a building block process which actually led to the foundation.
Right.
So before I ask the next question, I wanted to stop and thank all of our supporters, not just those who have supported us this year, but really since the beginning. You have helped POISE Foundation grow from an initial investment of $164,000 to a present asset value of more than $12 million. Over the years, POISE has poured into the community, distributing $18 million in grants and scholarships to deserving organizations and families all across Allegheny County, our Commonwealth, as well as the country. Even in the midst of this pandemic, POISE positions itself to thrive. So we launched the Critical Community Needs Fund, which supports small, mid-sized, Black-led organizations in our region that serve and sustain our community during the double crisis, really, of COVID-19, as well as the anti-Black violence that we experience. During that process, POISE was able to raise $1.5 million to support these organizations. And to date, we have given away $1.4 million to over 100 local organizations just from that fund alone. So before we talk about or look forward to the future, we wanted to take a pause to reflect on the resilience of the Black community. So today we have commissioned an original poem from spoken word artist Corey Lankford. He's here today to perform a piece entitled Black Dreams.
He stands in a field in a foreign land that doesn't speak his language. He's lost here. No recollection of his name, He's been branded and demanded to be a boy. But he's a man, with hands splintered by the weight of the work. He had a lot of time to think in the fields. These are black dreams. How will we survive? The instinct of kings is their ability to see a vision so powerful, so convincing that it can survive through church bombings and lynchings. It's the ability to see legacy, where children in black dreams with black joy have black wings and own black soil. These thoughts were seeds to the future. I will live on through you. Though I may never be it, I see it. I see writings and reading. I see teachers and breathing. I see building and growing and sowing so much wealth to the future. The wealth of the black dreams built from the souls of the minds that had nothing to build with, but an idea. And what if we owned this land? The horses, the harvests, the houses, all this. What would the sound of our children's laughter be like if they can sleep at night? We named our son Legend because he is the black collection of our ancestors' dreams. Though I am his father, he is bigger than me. He carries a nation on his back with hidden scars of those who dreamed in the beginning. This is the black resilience of black dreams.
For setting the state of tonight's critical conversation, POISE and the roots of Pittsburgh's Black Community Foundation. I would almost say it sounded to me like you were having a conversation or you had just interviewed Bernie Jones. So much of what was in that poem is what he expressed and talked and shared with all of us as he talked about legacy building. It wasn't just about service. It was about building wealth. It was about building control. And so we thank you for those words. POISE has always been rooted in the Black community. Even though other foundations existed at the time, I want to ask our guests, why do you believe that it was necessary to set up a Black foundation in the Pittsburgh area? What was, and again, I understand that we were probably a couple decades in the making of a POISE foundation. But in the late 60s, 70s, before the foundation was created, what was the environment in Pittsburgh? Why did you all, and I'll say Bernie Jones, but I'll say you all as well, you're incorporators. Why did you think it was necessary to actually create POISE Foundation?
Can I start with that?
Oh.
No, Lenny, go ahead.
Okay. What I was going to say is during the time of being around Mr. Jones, he always spoke as he was exposed to the workings of a foundation. And he brought that idea to us as board members and incorporators. And it was the thought of helping, as he would say, preparing for our children's children. So that was an idea that was planted in him. And that's why he wanted to look more into having a foundation so that we could practice that principle and that understanding of putting our resources together and using a portion of the interest so that it would always be there for the community. So I think with all of that exposure that he had to foundations and what that meant, he fitted into what his mission was for the POISE Foundation, to help our children's children.
Let me say this, and please understand, Bernie Jones saw Hill City go down. He saw Hill House rise up from there. and he saw different other organizations fail because of people giving money to that and having control over that. As he saw Urban Youth Action begging for money every year from 1966 on, he kept saying, there's got to be some kind of financial institution that we can have to actually pay for our own activity. So one of the things that he bumped into was something called, he used to have me go out and get all of the annual reports of all of the funders who were giving money to Urban Youth Action. We used to study those reports, and he would see how the Pittsburgh Foundation, the Alcoa Foundation, and all of them were giving money to different activities. And he kept saying to himself, why can't we do something like that? And that was the genesis for him actually thinking about, let's do that. And the name Leon Hickman was given to him by Bob Pease as somebody that might be able to assist him with this dream he had, which was to put together some institution. Well, once he found the Pittsburgh Foundation and took that Pittsburgh Foundation and started looking at that, he used to have conversations with us all about the hundreds of thousands of dollars that the Pittsburgh Foundation was giving out for things like a new instrument. Now that somebody gave money to the Pittsburgh Foundation just to buy one violin. Now they got enough money to buy a whole orchestra of violins. And he kept saying that over and over again, that this was ways in which people got a chance to fund their own activity. Well, POISE Foundation came out as a result of that. And you can't believe how Pittsburgh reacted to that idea of a POISE Foundation. Because up until 1979, because y'all want to talk about 80, but 1979 is when POISE actually went to the IRS about becoming a foundation. Well, at the same time that he did that, Mr. Jones got heat from his employer about the fact that he was starting to do this and they did not want it to happen. So we got to be frank about this. This is one of these conversations where people started to try to make sure Mr. Jones didn't get another raise. They didn't want him to, because he was talking about control. And that's what Mr. Lewis said just recently. We were talking about how do we get control over what it is that we're doing. And POISE Foundation was one of those activities where we started to say, here's how we get control.
Hey, Mark, Bernie would stop by my office once a week when I was a vice principal, and we would talk about controlling your own destiny. And he talked about the foundation. He talked about some of the things that he wanted to do. And I told him about my own experience of injustice. When I was in high school, I had our football team quit on Malacopa because they said black girls couldn't become cheerleaders. So we would just sit in my office sometime for an hour and discuss the future. And Richard, you made a really good point. I'm not going to name the hospital. Bernie was on their board. When the POISE Foundation was created, they asked him to leave the board. You know, why do you want to have a foundation? And I'm going to tell you something, the effect that he had on me in reference to my lifestyle and what I needed to do, he always talked about saving. And he also talked about helping others. That was his motto. How can I make a difference in the lives? Mark, when I heard you talk about POISE started with $164,000 in 12, Mark, I'm ready to break down in tears because Brother Jones was ahead of his time. And, I talk about, we've made some gains. We've had a black president. We've had a black vice president with Asian heritage. The National Football League is 80% African American, the National Basketball. I can go on and litanies of things. But the poverty level, and let me give you a point. The net worth of a European American is $195,000. For an African American, it's $25,000. The Kneeling Organization says it's going to take us 200 years to reach parity with white America. And let me say this to you. Bernie had probably one of the most powerful jobs organization, the Allegheny Community Development, because all those who were members, they were CEOs of the companies, they could make their own decisions. But you know what? He looked out for other people. I don't see that happening with a lot of people who have these top-notch jobs today. He jeopardized his own future to change the lives. So Mark, you're in a position to run a foundation. And I'm telling you, just the injustice we talked about all the time. And you know what? We just shared, and I didn't meet Mr. Jones until 1977 when I was at Martin Luther King. But he just encouraged me to, as I said, to serve, to help others. And I tell you what, that's why today, that we do what we do, helping African Americans about with their budget, their FICA scores. I'm gonna tell each and every one of you on this line, if you knew the poverty in our community, there's money, $4.1 trillion of disposable income after we pay our bills. How do we get people to invest and save? Here's what I told the group the other day. You have great jobs, but you have no power. The power, 50 of you had $100,000, we can go downtown and buy the U.S. Steel building. In this investment clubs that Brother Jones started, the Mister's Investment, ask yourself this question today. Where or why has nobody started another foundation? Why they don't have to start investment clubs? Because one of the things I found, we've been brainwashed to think that we're okay. And I know sometimes I go off on a tangent because I don't want to perpetuate any problem, but I want this man's legacy to live forever. And I said early on, I'm hoping, Mark, we have a new mayor. Richard, I'm just hoping we can get a street named after Mr. Jones, or we can get a school, something named after this man. I'm hoping that if I have to fly to Pittsburgh and present, I want to do this. So I want somebody to think about how do we do that for Mr. Jones?
Yes, sir. I hear you.
Yeah, we actually might have some opportunities to make that happen now.
Yes,
So,
indeed.
we need to work on. Yeah, I think as all of you were talking, kind of what resonated with me was especially, the last part about the sacrifice. Many people don't understand Bernie Jones worked for, especially back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, one of the most powerful organizations, not just in Pittsburgh, but really in the country.
Of the world.
In the world, right. And he was a, assistant director there. But at the same time, there were things said and done, like if you let the foundation go, we will double or triple your salary.
Yep.
And here you have a man that could have said, okay, my family will be taken care of. I'll be great. But he told them no. And he told them no because he knew the power of that whole, spectrum which you talk about, the idea of collective. We have Black billionaires, we have a lot of Black millionaires, but when you look at each of them individually, that's not power. The power is what happens when we bring all of that together. And that's the, what just Bernie Jones instilled, in me. Another question, just back, thinking back, right when the foundation was created. So at that time, Pittsburgh was probably had one of the largest foundation communities in the country.
Yes.
And in the midst of those large, powerful organizations, do you think that they were meeting the needs of the Black community at that time?
Nope.
No,
Absolutely not.
No way.
no.
Definitely not. Because there were different organizations like Pittsburgh and Better Block. There were organizations that were actually come out of the 68 riot, that whole idea of PACE that came out of the 68 riot. All that was about those foundations. In fact, they fought the United Way day in and day out. It wasn't even week in and week out. Day in and day out, they fought. The United Way fought to take that $600,000 away from PACE from the day they gave them the money. So I understand that all of that was going on, but there was no African Americans on no board of directors or trustees of any of the foundations before Bernie Jones. And they actually added Mr. Good after they found out that the POISE Foundation was actually incorporated and was functional.
But Richard, not only that, what Bernie would do at Allegheny Conference dinner each year,
yes,
he would get a table and invite a number of us to that event. And Mark, I've said this, for years. Pittsburgh, I had a difficult time because we had no power in this community, I think about it now today. Where's the Harvey Adams? Where's the Nate Smith? Where's the Bernie Jones? I'm just telling those individuals. And so, and Mark, what you said, I'm just so proud. But we need some people to step up to the plate. Yeah, we've always had great jobs, but how do we control our own destiny within our own community? In Philadelphia, somebody told me 5,000 young African Americans have been killed in that city. So what I'm saying to you, what do we need? And let me say this to you. My wife and I are pretty close to setting up our own foundation on financial literacy. And one of the things that we do, Mark, I tell people you have to do, and Bernie did it quite well. Philosophical. You got to get in the heads of the people you can save. You don't have to be in debt. You can make a difference in your community. Let me just give you, if I can, I graduated from the University of Idaho. I was one of 10 blacks on a campus of 12,000 whites. And, I whipped some butt back in the day, and I made it. But my professor called me in one day, Dr. Bent. He said, Bob, I want you to do something for me. I said, yes, sir. He said, I want you to save a penny a day. It was a leap year. That had been $3.66. And I said to myself, is he smoking the same thing I'm smoking? And then he said, listen, I want you to save a nickel. The next year had been $18. And what he was teaching me, philosophical, to understand saving, embracing that. And so those are some of the things that, like I said, Bernie Jones, and we talked about that all the time. And so what I'm saying to you, Mark, we have to find a way. Let me say this to you. I'm doing an economic summit here in Phoenix. I hear summits on everything. Think about this. When's the last time you heard in our community where we have an economic summit? That when we die, Black folks, we leave our families $1,000. When white people die, they leave their families $10,000. At one time, we couldn't buy insurance. When I was a trustee at LaRoche College, it was a man worked for Merrill Lynch. When he passed away, he left LaRoche College $250,000. Because every time I come back to Pittsburgh, I have to contribute to somebody's funeral. So what I'm saying to you, I know there's organizations out there, companies talk about financial wellness, but we need to take it from our perspective, embrace and help these people uplift themselves, know that they can have a savings account. Listen, this is something you need to understand. The housing market, European Americans in this country own 76% housing. With us, it's 34%. You know how much money's been made in the housing market in Phoenix here? People are making $354,000, $500,000 on their housing. We missed that, Carl. I'm sorry to be so passionate.
Right. Yeah, that's perfect.
And the one thing we need to just think about is, how did BJ get that money to start?
We'll be right back.
Okay. BJ actually started that back when we started Urban Youth Action. When we started the USAF Fund, it was the beginning of the endowment fund for Urban Youth Action. When we started out with a nickel, Lenny Henry got a nickel taken out of her paycheck. I got a nickel taken out of mine. We went down to savings and loan, dwelling house savings and loan with a bag of nickels and opened up a savings account. That savings account was part of the money that you just mentioned, Mark Lewis, about the money to start POISE Foundation. That was those nickels, because we took all of that money and moved it over towards putting that into starting the foundation. But that's the kind of thing that I think we need to start and make sure that we answer the question, how do we go on with the future? And that future is going to be, Mark, up to you and the rest of the board members of POISE to start training and educating and getting philosophical understanding with people who are going to take your place.
Yeah, and I think you made an excellent point about Urban Youth Action, right? The endowment fund was started, and Lenny, you all were involved with the Gallant Ladies, FAMS, and all of those organizations that basically did grassroots fundraising.
Right.
By the time the foundation started, I think Urban Youth Action was one of the 3 funds that were put in to create POISE Foundation.
Right.
It may have been, about $100,000 in the endowment fund at that time. Urban Youth Action's endowment fund now is well over $1 million, right? So we can't always think about the end at the begin. Well, let me put it this way. We can't always think that, okay, we don't have $1 million, so let's not do it. Let's not start.
Right. Exactly.
Going back to Bernie Jones and his whole, Lenny mentioned it earlier, children's children.
Right.
Small investments we make today may be worth millions of dollars to our future generations.
Exactly.
And so it's extremely important for us to get that philosophical mindset, to start thinking about investing. And Bob, to your point, a lot of times it doesn't take a lot of money to create or to buy insurance.
That's right.
Right.
And you can leave substantial amounts of money, right? As a result of that, we get caught up in, we don't want to think about insurance because that involves death.
Right.
Guess what? You're going to die one way or the other. You're going to die leaving something. You're going to die leaving nothing.
Right.
Hey, Mark, one of the things you want to think about, Mark, you'll be surprised. We just set up a curriculum with the Salvation. I'm on the board of directors for the Salvation Army in South Phoenix. It's a project where the Crop family, McDonald's, they built 8 of them. It's an $80 million center. And my wife and I, we set up a curriculum in the African American community. So we'll start. We have a 3-year grant. We'll start back up on the 26th. And first of all, my wife and I kick it off. We talk about the philosophical. We talk about FICO scores. We talk about how to set up a budget. We talk about insurance. We have all of our presenters were African Americans that came in. And so that's what I talk about. Then we're trying to plan this economic summit. When we have an economic summit, we bring experts in from a very pragmatic standpoint to get it. You'll be surprised how many people in our community don't have checking accounts. And so, I'm thinking of something in the near future. The POISE may want to think about, like you said, insurance. I'll give you an example. My daughter has like $1.3 million insurance. I think she pays $50 a month. And so, like I said, we don't understand insurance is just not to bury us. And I think the POISE sit in a great position. Like I said to Mark, I'm so glad because I want to start contributing to POISE, and I want to do what I need to do in reference. When you told me Daryl Perdue, one of the originators, he's on the board of directors. But this is just, like I said, you've enthused me, you've invigorated me that I need to do more. I'm out there now, but I like I said, God has blessed me to continue to go on, and I want to do more myself.
Right. So
I know my wife and
I didn't hear you, Rich.
My wife and I have a couple of scholarships and different other things, and we've been pushing that. I've been trying to push it with some of the graduates, and I know Lenny might be quiet, but that lady is the one of the most powerful people on POISE whole activity, because what she's done with FAMS over the last 30 years has just been tremendous. And we're gonna have a story about her, a video about her and all of her cohorts. And now I want you all to recognize something about Lenny Henry. Lenny Henry made herself president for life of the FAMS organization.
Amen.
She didn't let nobody come in and untake that control. Woman stayed on it. And I always wondered, why did she do that? But then as I thought about Bernie Jones, he was trying to do that. He was trying to make sure that we made sure that we stayed in control. It's about control and activity. So, Miss Henry, you all can keep talking, but the real story is her putting it out there and keeping it out there for all these years. And now, Lenny, can you tell us how much money FAM's got in POISE right now? Can you really tell us that?
Well, Mark.
So it's I don't have the exact number in front of us, but I believe FAM started maybe with about $5,000 as an endowment fund, and it is well above 6 figures now. So again, the growth of when you invest, that's what happens over years, right? And now that's money that can be used forever for future generations.
And
so
Mark,
again,
Richard, you're right. Lenny's story need to be told.
Right.
See, we don't tell those stories, Lenny, because you're a model, just like Mr. Jones. Your story need to be told, and then mentor other young people that come behind you. That's Richard, you're absolutely right.
I mean, because that's going to be our educational piece to continue POISE Foundation, is to get people like Lenny and Bob and start educating former people who are part of this organization. We got thousands of UYA graduates out there that have done some great stuff. We got some really impressive children in our clan. I mean, Bob Pipkin's son and daughter, Lenny's son and daughter. We got, Richie's still out there. Mr. Lewis got 4 or 5 of them his own self. I mean, between the 3 girls and them having kids, we need to educate our own and start a whole institute.
Richard, Richard, think about this when you're at Virginia, Richard. When I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, my kids were here, been there 18 and a half years. And we got into war from the city of Tempe before I worked helping African Americans. You should think about, you don't have to start with a lot of people, Richard. Just start talking to people. And it's Rico, Richard, I could put something on Facebook that's crazy. 1,000 people look at it. You put something about finances, nobody look at it. But think about this, Richard, in Virginia. Think about it, because you and your wife are well connected. And I had tons of information, because we also doing something with young people, understanding finances with young people right now, teaching them from a very simplistic standpoint. You got to start young. They said some kids are starting as young as 2. So think about, Richard, if we can connect, and we got types of information that can help you if you want to do something, and just start. We started with, I think, 2 people. Now we got close to 500 people we're working with.
There you go. But see, I want to get it started with POISE, because if they all start with POISE, it'll start. Okay. Because it's going to be like a funnel. We got to have a pipeline. Like they got a pipeline from the school to the jail. We got to have a pipeline from our community to POISE Foundation. And that pipeline has to be people that we know, people that we've learned to deal with, and get them educated so that they can take over. Mark ain't going to be there 100 years. I'm not going to be there no more 100 years. I mean, we got to recognize Bernie Jones is in his grave. He left us to do something.
Amen.
And when we get away from that, we're going to be lost. We have the opportunity right now, between this pandemic and between the way communication now. Look at us. We're on a script right now. We could have kids from all over the country coming on a streaming video like this and being educated by a Bob Pipkin, a Mark Lewis, a Lenny Henry. Could be educated, and all they have to do is come on the set and sign up and be part of that, because we have the technology now. And the only thing that's lacking is somebody to lead it, and Lenny and Mr. Lewis funding it, because both of them have the ability to fund anything we want done now. See, and
I think that's a great conversation, and definitely something, I'm jotting that down, that we can look into in the new year, as we talk about, what the next steps are.
Right.
So one of the greatest gifts handed to me has been the opportunity to lead this foundation for the past, which is amazing, past 2 decades. I mean, Bernie Jones was president for 16 years, and I'm going on 20 now, so that's just amazing to me.
Yes.
I followed in his footsteps as the founder, and one of the things that he would often say is that the greatest thing that a generation can do is to lay a few stepping stones for the next generation.
Amen.
And I think, Richard, that's what all of you have really been talking about, is how do we continue this process on? How do we lay those next steps for the next generation? And he believed a community was only as strong as its foundation. And we've used that over the years to say, our community, not just Pittsburgh, but really in this country, right? Can you imagine how strong we as a Black community could be? I often say this, and Bob, this goes to some of your numbers. Black people in this country, you'll hear different numbers, but let's just say, the number right now is we have $1.3 trillion of disposable income.
Yep.
If we took 1% of that and put it in a pot,
talk to me, Mark.
In 5 years, we would have $65 billion in that pot.
Yes.
1%. And I often say that most of us, we're at the end of this year. If we went back to January and tried to count all of what we spend our money on, most of us would say, okay, 1%, I have no idea. Right. Which means that we probably waste 1% of our money a year. If we were able to capture that 1%, it would not take long at all for us to have, in 5 years, $65 billion in a pot. Imagine what we could do with that type of, resource.
Mark, you make a good point. And so, Mark, that's why it's really imperative that we get people to understand. Mark, let me give you, I've been working with a person, they get about $10,000 a month from their retirement. And he was telling me that he's behind on his bills. He gets 10 late notice. He's paying $350 a month. Then he was telling me a situation where his wife was taking a shower and the water was cold. He didn't pay the heating bill. Wow. So what I'm saying to you, and think about this, Mark, 60% of professional basketball players are broke after 5 years, and 75% of football players are broke. So what I'm saying to you, we have to find a way to educate young people at not only, in our community, because there's 6 billionaires in our community, 650 billionaires in America. And like I said, at $1.3 trillion at the disposable income after we pay our bills, if we just invested that. And Bernie taught me save $5, save $10. And so we have to find a way to embrace those people and get churches. Think about this. I was talking to a pastor. I was telling him, I said, sir, your tithes would probably grow. You have a strong congregation. Just think if you taught the people in your church about financial wellness, some of the things they need to do, how they need to save and they need to invest. Because as you know, I did it for a long time myself, Mark. I lived from paycheck to paycheck when I first got started. I thought that's the way you live. And I didn't say, when I got a part-time job, I spent that money. So you have this philosophical change the mindset. And believe me, it's not easy because a lot of people in a deep red, they don't understand it.
Yeah. So at this point, we're getting pretty close to time. I want to kind of go around and see, maybe start with Lenny. Do you all have any like POISE memories or POISE stories that you can think of that you would like to share? Anything that really stands out over the 40 years of our history?
The one thing I want to make sure everybody know is the Pittsburgh community wrote a 2-page letter telling Mr. Jones how inappropriate it was for him to start a foundation. The letter was penned by the executive director of the U.S. Steel Foundation. I have that letter somewhere in my archives here, but we were not, people didn't want us to start this. But now that we've started it, we need to make sure that we look forward to the future. And that question that you had on here about what is the envision for the foundation for the next 40 years, I want to jump to that question right now. What do we envision? We envision that we are actually in control of doing things, not just surveying folk, but to survey them and institute various things that will help us get out of this situation that we find ourselves in. And the more we do that, the more we plan for the future, the more we set up things, institutes, seminars, conventions, workshops, special groups, because the example is right now. If it wasn't for this pandemic, none of the things that you see would have been done. This pandemic has gotten people to be more creative about how to do stuff. Well, POISE, you have to do the same thing. You got to get more creative about how you do things, and it has to include educating the future, young people and adults that's going to take over and run POISE Foundation.
Well,
that means you have to hire some of us as consultants to do it, but you got to do it.
When you talk about POISE, Bernie would stop by my office, and he was almost in tears sometime. He was saying, Bob, I want something where we'll be free, we'll be independent. And when this hospital, I think they put him off because he started the POISE Foundation. But he said he was not quitting. He thought of his children and other children. That's why so many kids have such respect. As I said, he got me to, become chairman of the board of Mrs. Action, vice president, originator of POISE Foundation, and so many other things that, see, Mark, I was lost. I was an athlete and I didn't know anything about giving back to the community. And I'm telling you something, I think about everything that Bernie's done in my life. And somebody who was a nobody, but how he embraced me. And I love this man, to the day. And I think about him when we lost him, we just lost a great man who was able to lift children up, lift people up, lift your spirit up. And like I said, what he did for me, like I said, I love him to the day end. And so I'm hoping in the near future, Mark, and, I'm not in Arizona, but, whatever I can do to try to make a difference in each of us lifting these people up. Thank you very much, Mark.
Lenny, anything you wanted to add?
It's all been said, but for me personally, what I got from all of my involvement with Mr. Jones has really helped me to understand reaching out to others and sharing the wealth of understanding about wealth building. And so I'm just thankful for that. And I continue to share that with groups that I'm around, introducing them to wealth building and those kind of situations like that. But I hope and I do pray for POISE that we can continue to increase our number of endowments so that they will continue to help our community and help provide services that are so needed in the community. So I hope that we can just grow so that we would be a mega foundation, and this is what I vision for the foundation.
I appreciate that. That's definitely our goal. It's not just to grow and to be big for the sake of being big, but for the model that it creates to show that we can, when we come together, create something that is lasting, that is substantial and very impactful for our community. I think is what Mr. Jones would be extremely proud of if we can reach that type of a legacy. So first of all, thank you all for sharing in conversation this evening. We really appreciate it. I thought it was extremely important for us to go kind of back to the beginning and really get the insight of you all as original incorporators, especially knowing what was happening, during that time frame. We do have, a sad note in the life of the foundation. And as you all know, and several people know, that we lost one of our true supporters, one of those individuals that Bernie Jones raised since he was about 13 years old, and really stepped in his life and really changed that. And that was Paul Patton. Paul was what I would call a true warrior, and not only a friend of POISE Foundation, but a true guide and advocate for POISE and everything it stands for. In the last 2 months, not only did we lose Paul, but we also lost Gwen, his wife. And so they have both transitioned. And Paul was one of the first young men that Bernie Jones pulled under his wing and mentored. He would often tell the story of how Bernie Jones put him on the path to success by giving him opportunities that most young boys in the Hill District of Pittsburgh didn't have in the 1950s. And Richard talked a little bit about that. Colonel Patton retired from the Air Force in the early 90s. He became vice president of a technology company started by Pittsburgh native Don Campbell, and eventually became senior vice president of CACI, a global information systems company. And what I pulled up a video earlier and reminded me that Paul was actually inducted into the United States Army. They have a Hall of Fame for communications and information systems officers. And Paul was one of the few individuals several years ago to be inducted into that Hall of Fame. And although Paul lived in Virginia, he would never let you forget that he was just a old boy from the Hill Districts, from the Hill District of Pittsburgh and from the streets of the Hill District. And so we just want to recognize and acknowledge Paul, and our prayers continue to go out to his children, John and Keisha, and we'll just, he always has a place in my heart as a mentor, but a place in our foundation. And several years ago, we actually named Paul Chair Emeritus of POISE Foundation, being the first chairperson of the foundation. So with that, I want to thank all of you who
thank you.
tuned in. Thank you. Yes, sir. You all have any final comments?
No, just I'm very honored, Mark. Thank you very much. You made my day.
I appreciate it. No, you made our day, accepting and being on the call with us all. So I've taken notes. We're going to make some of the things and take some of the suggestions you all made to heart. I think one of the things that we haven't done a well enough job at POISE Foundation goes back to the misters and goes back to a lot of what took place before POISE Foundation, and those were all the seminars and the education training that was done. So Richard, I hear you, and we're going to jump on that.
Mark, if I have to, come in, I can take care of my own. If you need me, if I need to come in, I'll come in. Okay.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and have a great evening.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark.
Nice seeing Richard, everybody.
You too.
Happy holidays to all of you too. Merry Christmas. I'll send you all a postcard or something.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, bye-bye.
Are we off the air now?